Ben Shapiro had a curious tweet regarding healthcare in America where he looked at obesity rates and life expectancy and thought, looks like we're winning. So before I get to the tweet, it's important to take a look at what he embedded in the tweet, which was this chart. It shows obesity rates based on country, and at the very top, of course, you see that the United States is #1. In fact, we have the highest obesity rate with 40% of adults overweight. Now notice that the countries lower on the list have an asterisk, and that's because they collect their data based on self-reporting. I do think that it's important to know the difference in methodology in collecting that data because self-reporting is a little less reliable than other means of collecting that data, okay? But with that said, at the bottom of the list, and I do believe that this is an accurate outcome, is Japan. They have a very low rate of obesity at 4.2%. Okay, so with that said, Ben Shapiro says this, one key takeaway. America is amazing at keeping obese people alive. The overall US life expectancy is 79.11, so that's years of course, despite an obesity rate of 40%. France is at 83.13 despite an obesity rate nearly 60% lower. Japan is at 85.03 with an obesity rate about 90% lower. Okay, well, important to note that the World Bank's analysis of life expectancy in 2019, so before the pandemic, was fascinating because the United States of all these countries ranked at 54 for life expectancy, behind countries like Lebanon, which was much higher on the list, believe it or not, Bosnia, and even Bahrain, which was at 50. We were at 54. So Cenk.
Okay, so first, on a lighter note, I now understand what happened to me. America's #1, Turkey's #6. What am I gonna do? Okay, so now on to the main issue here. I don't get his tweet. He's like, we're more obese, so we die younger. And okay, well,
I think,
how does that prove that our healthcare system is good?
I think what he's trying to argue is that given how high the obesity rate is, it's amazing that the average, right? Like life expectancy is 79 years old.
But it's not that good. And even his own tweet proves it because other countries are at 83 and 85. That means in Japan, they're living 6 more years than we are.
Yeah.
How does that prove that our healthcare system is better?
I don't know. Look, I read the tweet last night and I was a little stoned, so I thought maybe I'll read it in the morning. It'll make more sense. I'm just keeping it real, you know. I know myself. I'll read it in the morning, and maybe there's a point. Because look, I try to have an open mind. Maybe there's a point to be made here. But no, I read it in the morning, and I was like, this still makes no sense. And if you actually look at the data, we are not doing well. Okay, our healthcare is the most expensive, meaning it costs the country the most. And we have the worst outcomes. And I want to actually provide the data and the evidence that bears that out. So Ben is praising America for having an even shorter lifespan than we already do considering our high rates of obesity, even though our life expectancy is 3 years less than the OECD average. It's 3 years less than the OECD average. Okay, that's important to know. That was left out of the tweet, probably intentionally. Now, it speaks to America's focus on sick care, right? So not preventative care. In fact, if you look at Cuba, our life expectancy is very similar to that of Cuba's, and Cuba has no resources, none, right? And they know they have no resources, so they focus all of their medical attention on preventative care because that is cheaper to treat. Whereas in America, preventative care is costly for people, especially if they don't have health insurance, so they forego seeing a doctor. So I wanna just quickly address the obesity thing for a second. When you have health insurance, let's say it's provided by your employer like it is for me here at TYT, you feel confident in going to the doctor every year for your annual checkup, for your blood test to make sure everything is okay. I do it every year, like clockwork. And I learn things about myself and my body that I otherwise would not know. So for instance, I have high cholesterol. That information allows me to change my behavior to keep my cholesterol under control, okay? It's hereditary, so it is what it is. It's unfortunately the card I was dealt. On the other hand, when it comes to things like obesity, remember, I think there's a tendency to assume that all obesity is caused by overeating, being irresponsible with your diet. And for some people that is the case, right? But for others, like let's say you have a thyroid condition that leads to extreme weight gain, but you don't have health insurance and you don't even know you have that thyroid condition. You get what I'm saying?
Of course.
So like having that affordable healthcare, having the ability to go see a doctor every year without fear of surprise bills and astronomical costs is so important, even in keeping obesity rates under control or lowering obesity rates, in my opinion.
Okay, look guys, it doesn't really matter too much why we're obese. And is it partly because we're eating the wrong things? Definitely, okay? Is it partly because of different situations? Sure, like everybody has a different story. So don't go around judging people. I just want to be clear about that. Now, there is one part of our diet that is actually related to the government, and that's the fact that we put high fructose corn syrup in everything. And why do we do that? Because we give subsidies to farmers to produce that corn. It gets turned into high fructose corn syrup. So our government subsidies created that problem in the first place. By the way, Republicans love those subsidies. They claim that they hate subsidies overall, but when it comes to people in red states, they're like, and especially if they're giant agriculture companies, funnel the subsidies over to them. And countries that have less high fructose corn syrup have much lower rates of obesity. So now, of course, again, the right wing doesn't want to talk about that. I don't want our taxpayer money going to that. Now, but the most important part of all of this is universal health care produces the results that Anna talked about. All of those countries have universal health care. They all live longer than us. We do not have universal health care. In this country, we call that Medicare for all. And we live 6 years less than people in Japan do. We're literally robbed of 6 years of our lives. Okay, say that
on average.
Yeah, say that a couple of years is due to diet and other factors in Japan, right? Say a couple of years, maybe a year is due to high fructose corn syrup. But that still leaves 3-4 years of our lives that we lose because our government will not do what every other developed nation on earth does, which is universal health care. And guess who hates the idea of universal health care? Because it might cost them a nickel, Ben Shapiro.
And look, the real issue here is he's perpetuating a long-standing talking point and a myth by, I even hesitate to say the Republican Party, because at this point it's not limited to the Republican Party. You see a lot of this messaging coming from some corporate Democrats as well. And it's this notion that everything is based on personal responsibility, right? So he's focusing on obesity rates because he wants to make a point about how your behavior is what's at fault here, as opposed to a system that leaves people uninsured and unable to get the health care that they need, okay? So one other thing I want to quickly bring up is a study that was just done by the Commonwealth Fund. They did an analysis of healthcare in the United States relative to other developed countries, and the results are not good, to say the least. So in 2020, there were nearly 24 maternal deaths for every 100,000 live births in the United States, more than 3 times the rate in most of the other high income countries we studied. So was it the pregnant women's fault? Was it their fault that they died during their live birth? I mean,
I thought these guys were pro-life, by the way. So why aren't we pouring resources to fix that?
Yeah.
Why aren't we doing universal health care coverage, which we know would fix that? Oh, because, and this isn't about Ben Shapiro. Like, so he just represents the rich. That's the whole point of Ben Shapiro's show is the rich are awesome and we take too much from them and we should take it instead from you, the middle class and the poor. And if you live a couple of years less, who cares? Don't touch the rich. But in this case, remember, on average, all of those countries, not 1 or 2 random countries, it's dozens of countries that have all done it and all their system costs half as much as our system costs. So actually, rich people would save money too. So why are they doing this? Healthcare companies and drug companies have bought off our entire government. And so they funnel in billions of dollars in campaign donations, otherwise known as bribes. By the way, Ben Shapiro loves money in politics. We had a debate about it. Even his own crowd booed him on that one. They loved everything else, but when he was like, oh, I love, politicians should get millions of dollars from corporations. And I bet that doesn't affect them at all. Boo, right? Because it's absurd. We're all literally dying, so healthcare companies and drug companies can make more money off of us.
And just to give you the comparison of how much we spend on healthcare relative to other countries that have far better outcomes, let's take a look at graphic 8 here. We'll show you a chart. And the top line that you see there is the United States. We spend more on healthcare than all those other countries, okay? This shows that the US spent 17.8% of its entire GDP on healthcare. The OECD average is 9.6%. Health spending in the United States was 3 to 4 times higher than in South Korea, New Zealand, and Japan, which all have universal healthcare systems and far better health outcomes. None of that surprises me, because if you're not in the top echelons of financial wealth, you experience what this healthcare system really is. So look, Ben and I got into a debate recently on his show on this topic. It hasn't been released yet, it'll be released soon. But something that he said to me, and it's something that I hear from conservatives and corporate Democrats all the time. Well, we actually have the best healthcare because of the outcomes on treatments, like cancer treatments and things like that. That's absolutely true. We do. We have the best health treatments in the world if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, you're screwed. Either you go bankrupt because you have to go in debt, or you just decide, I don't want to put my family through that financial stress. I'm just not going to go through the treatment. And a lot of Americans make that decision.
Here, I'll give you the decoder ring for Ben's show. Once you realize that everything he says is from the perspective of someone really wealthy, it all makes sense. You go, oh, I get it. That doesn't help the average American at all, but it would really help the rich or specific folks in the rich, like in the case of drug company executives, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why in that particular case, he says, what do you mean we have the best healthcare in the world? For people who are really, really rich. For the rest of you, you're gonna live less years than all those other developed countries. But my show's not directed to you, he's basically saying. I don't care if that happens to you. In fact, I'm going to blame you for it and I'm gonna call you fat. So you see, get off of rich people's, you know what, because it's your fault. That's the point of his show. So hey, if you like that, if you like greedy, rich people fanboying, all right, then Shapiro's show is perfect for you. You'll love it.